You've been told the way to deal with a narcissist is to fight back, to finally scream, to finally unleash all the anger you've bottled inside. But here is the paradox. It is not rage that makes them disappear. Rage feeds them. What truly dismantles their power is something quieter, more unsettling, and far more final: clarity. Carl Jung wrote that the narcissist lives by projection and dies when the mirror refuses to answer. This means that the narcissist is less a person in dialogue with you and more a reflection addict. They survive as long as you give them an image of themselves to push against, to seduce, to dominate. When you shout, you're still reflecting them. When you explain, you're still reflecting them. When you justify, you're still reflecting them. And this is why so many of you feel trapped. Because no matter what you do, rage, plead, prove your case, you remain locked in their hall of mirrors. You think you are resisting, but in fact, you are feeding the reflection that keeps them alive. The danger is not that you lack the strength to confront them. The danger is that you have not yet discovered the one boundary, the one sentence, the one act of withdrawal that makes the reflection shatter. This was Jung's insight, that the persona, the mask, cannot withstand unarguable reality. And when you stand in reality without flinching, the mask collapses. Because the narcissist does not know how to live outside of illusion, therefore, the moment you refuse to play the part assigned to you, the illusion cannot continue. This is what I will show you, the hidden rule, the dark rule, that makes every narcissist vanish, not because you destroyed them, but because you stopped feeding them. And now we move from the paradox into the mechanism itself. To understand why this works, you must first see why narcissists do not fear conflict at all, why in fact they feed on it. The first mistake you must unlearn is this: thinking that conflict weakens the narcissist. It does not. Conflict is their oxygen. When you rage, when you defend, when you hurl accusations, you imagine that you are breaking free. But in truth, you are writing them new lines in the play they've been rehearsing their whole lives. They are not afraid of your fury. They are addicted to it. Because anger, even in its purest form, still bends your attention toward them. Jung observed that what we resist persists. He meant that the very act of fighting against a force can tether us to it more tightly. This is the narcissist's secret weapon. They create endless cycles of resistance. You shout, they smirk. You withdraw for a day, they pull you back with a text. You cry, they play the savior. Each reaction confirms their existence. Each reaction proves that you are still revolving around them. Let me give you a picture. Imagine a patient Jung once described, a woman locked in battle with her domineering husband. She fought him every day, point by point, convinced that victory would come through argument. But the husband grew stronger with every battle. Why? Because her resistance gave him proof that he was central to her world. He didn't care whether she agreed. He only cared that she couldn't stop revolving around him. That is the paradox. Narcissists do not starve when you fight them. They starve when you ignore them. They do not vanish in the fire of your anger. They vanish in the cold clarity of your boundary. Because what they cannot survive is not hostility. It is emptiness, the silent mirror that no longer reflects. And this brings us to the real mask they wear, and the reason you keep getting trapped inside it. To understand why the boundary works, you must first understand the mask. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social face we wear to meet the world. For most people, the persona is flexible. You wear one at work, another at home, another with friends. It protects you, but it does not consume you. For the narcissist, however, the mask is not a tool. It is the only reality they know. Beneath it lies a cavernous emptiness, a shadow they cannot face. Jung warned that when the shadow is too unbearable, the psyche builds a false sun to stand in its place. That false sun is the narcissist's mask. Charming, magnetic, wounded, heroic, whatever gets them the most reflection from others. But here is the catch. A mask cannot survive on its own. It requires an audience. Without someone watching, believing, responding, The mask collapses. That is why the narcissist is so relentless. They are not trying to win an argument. They are trying to survive annihilation. You may have seen this. They shift identities with dizzying speed. Victim one moment, savior the next, seducer a few hours later. None of it is random. Each mask is tailored to keep you hooked, to ensure you keep reflecting them back. And this is where you, the empath, become ensnared. Because you see through the mask, but you also pity it. You sense the void underneath, the frightened child Jung described as the soul that could not grow. And so you stay explaining, forgiving, giving them one more chance. You believe you are helping, but what you are really doing is feeding the mask so it never falls. This is why your anger, your compassion, your endless explanations never end the cycle. The mask can wear them all. It only dissolves when you introduce something unarguable, your boundary, your refusal to keep being the mirror. And yet, knowing this doesn't make it easy, because your very wiring pulls you into the trap of over-explaining, of trying to save what cannot be saved. This is where the dance becomes deadly, because the narcissist survives through masks, and you, the empath, survive through meaning. You feel compelled to explain. You believe that if you just choose the right words, the right tone, the right timing, they will finally understand. You tell yourself, if they could just see my heart clearly, they would change. But this is the trap. The narcissist does not want to understand. They want you to keep explaining forever, because every explanation keeps you orbiting their world. Jung warned against this cycle when he described the archetype of the rescuer. He noted that the rescuer often becomes enslaved to the very suffering they are trying to heal. You see their wound, their hidden child, their potential for transformation, and you overgive, pouring your energy into a vessel that cannot hold it. You know this feeling. They accuse you, and instead of holding the line, you launch into a 20-minute defense. They withdraw, and instead of letting them go, you send 3 messages just to clarify. They twist your words, and instead of refusing the game, you stay up all night writing an essay in your head to prove your innocence. Do you see it? Each act of over-explaining is not liberation, it is surrender. Each act of overgiving is not love, it is sacrifice at an altar that demands more with every offering. And the more you explain, the more they confuse. The more you give, the more they take. Because this was never a misunderstanding to be resolved. This was a stage play designed to keep you locked inside. The only way out is to do the one thing you fear most. Stop explaining, stop giving, and introduce a boundary that cannot be negotiated. A line that is short, unarguable, and final. And that line, the dark rule itself, is what we must now turn to. Here it is. The truth you've been circling, the truth you've perhaps been too afraid to act upon, the dark rule. It is not a complicated speech. It is not a heroic confrontation. It is one sentence, delivered without anger, without apology, without explanation. That doesn't work for me. This conversation is over. Then silence, withdrawal. You do not argue, you do not explain, you do not repeat yourself, you simply exit. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For the narcissist, this is impossible. They have built their life on rejection of the true self. So when you stand in your own self, unapologetic, unshaken, uninterested in the theater, they collapse. Because the mask requires your participation. Without it, the mask suffocates. Why does this work? Because conflict is a game. Anger, defense, tears, they all keep the story alive. But a clear, calm boundary is not a game. It is reality, and reality is their greatest enemy. Think of it like this. A fire consumes oxygen. As long as you supply air, the flames rage. The dark rule is the closing of the door, the removal of oxygen. There is no dramatic explosion. The fire simply dies. Of course, they will not go quietly. At first, they will rage. They will bargain. They will accuse you of cruelty, coldness, arrogance. They will try every mask they have ever worn. But here is the key. You do not move. You do not explain. you do not break the silence. Because this is not cruelty. This is individuation. Jung described individuation as the moment when you step out of the collective dream, when you refuse to play roles that are not yours. The dark rule is individuation in action. It is the refusal to play the role of mirror, rescuer, or victim. It is the birth of your authentic self in the face of their illusion. And once spoken, once held, the dark rule triggers a chain reaction inside the narcissist. Because they cannot survive without the mirror, they are forced into one of three desperate responses. When you finally use the dark rule, do not expect silence at first. Expect turbulence. Narcissists are not built to accept boundaries. They are built to break them. Their entire existence depends on keeping the mirror polished and turned toward them. When you refuse, when you shut the door, when you step out of the role, they panic. And they will show it in one of three ways. Reaction 1. Rage. The mask cracks violently. They hurl insults, slam doors, flood your phone with messages. They accuse you of betrayal, coldness, even madness. This is not real strength, it is desperation. They are flailing because the oxygen has been cut off. Jung once said that the shadow erupts when the ego feels cornered. This eruption is their shadow screaming at the loss of control. Do not mistake the volume for power. It is the howl of collapse. Reaction 2. Charm offensive. When rage fails, they pivot. Suddenly, the voice softens. They become sweet, attentive, remorseful. I was wrong, they whisper. No one understands me like you. But notice, this is not true remorse. It is strategy. It is a new mask, designed to lure you back into explaining, forgiving, engaging. The test is simple. Does their apology demand your immediate return, or do they respect your silence? If it demands, it is a trap. Reaction 3. Silent disappearance. The most deceptive of all. One day they are simply gone. No calls, no explanations. The boundary forced them to retreat, and now they vanish in order to punish you with absence. But remember, absence is not power. It is retreat. They may circle back weeks or months later, testing to see if your boundary still stands, and it must. Because if you open the door again, the cycle resets. These three reactions, rage, charm, disappearance, are not random. They are predictable survival strategies. And when you know them, you can stand unmoved. You can recognize each mask as the last gasp of a system that cannot function without your reflection. The moment you recognize their reactions as symptoms, not truths, you take back your power. And this brings us to a story Jung himself often pointed toward, a case that shows exactly what happens when someone finally withdraws the mirror. Let me take you into Jung's consulting room, into one of the most haunting dynamics he ever described. A young woman came to him exhausted, hollowed out by years with a man who thrived on her confusion. He belittled her in private, charmed in public, and every night she rehearsed speeches in her head, desperate to prove her worth. By the time she arrived, she had no voice left. Jung listened quietly, then gave her no long lecture, no elaborate treatment plan. He asked a single question. What if you stopped explaining yourself entirely? She was stunned. If I don't explain, she said, he'll think he's right. And Jung replied, not in pity, but in clarity, he already thinks he's right. Your explanations don't change that. They only keep you in his world. Something shifted. For the first time, she glimpsed the possibility that she was not responsible for the illusion he lived in, that she could simply refuse to participate. So she tried it. One evening, when the accusations began, instead of launching into her defense, she spoke a single line. That doesn't work for me. And she left the room. No anger, no pleading, just a boundary. The result? He raged for days, then wept with false contrition, then vanished into silence. Every mask he owned failed when faced with her refusal to play. And here is the crucial part. She did not win him back. She did not heal him. She did not transform the relationship into something golden. She simply ended the cycle inside herself. She discovered what Jung called individuation, the birth of her own reality beyond the grip of another. The man did not vanish because she destroyed him. He vanished because she stopped feeding the mask that needed her to survive. This case reveals the core of the dark rule. When you withdraw the mirror, you are not killing them. You are liberating yourself. But even as liberation dawns, a new fear rises. How do you hold such a boundary without collapsing into guilt? How do you endure the storm of accusations that tell you you're selfish, cold, unloving? That is where we turn next. Here lies the most dangerous undertow, not the narcissist's rage, but your own guilt. You set the boundary, you withdraw, you walk away, and then the whispers begin inside you. Was I cruel? Did I abandon them? Am I heartless? This is the empath's torment. You confuse self-protection with selfishness. Jung wrote that guilt often arises not from doing wrong, but from breaking with collective expectation. And that is precisely what you are doing. You are refusing the ancient role of the caretaker, the forgiver, the one who absorbs wounds without end. The guilt is not proof you were wrong. It is proof that you finally chose yourself. So how do you hold the line? By remembering 3 principles. First, a boundary is not a weapon. It is a wall. You are not punishing them. You are protecting yourself. Walls do not accuse. They simply exist. That doesn't work for me is not a dagger. It is a door you close to keep your inner life intact. Second, brevity is strength. The longer you talk, the more you leak. Each apology, each explanation, each extra sentence pulls you back into their orbit. This is why the dark rule is 1 sentence, no more. Think of it as a scalpel, sharp, clean, leaving no edge to grab. Third, prepare your exit cues. Boundaries are not just words, they are movement. You may need to walk out of the room, hang up the call, block the number. The narcissist will test whether you mean it. Your silence and your departure are the proof that you do. And as you do this, anchor yourself with an inner mantra. Whisper it if you must. I choose clarity over chaos. I choose life over the mirror. You will feel guilt, but you must see it for what it is. A ghost of your old role, not a guide for your future. The narcissist thrives on your guilt. Therefore, when you hold steady, you are not only saving yourself, you are starving the illusion. This is why silence, more than any argument, is the true solvent of their mask. Silence is not absence. Silence is power. Now we arrive at the most counterintuitive truth. Silence is stronger than any explanation. Why? Because explanation assumes dialogue. It assumes the other person is willing to meet you in reality. But the narcissist is not looking for reality. They are looking for fuel. Every sentence you speak is wood for their fire. Jung once warned, where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. Silence is precisely that wisdom. It refuses the false choice between rage and reason, between defending yourself and collapsing into guilt. Silence is not emptiness, it is integration. It is the moment where your thoughts and feelings unite into one wordless refusal to play. Think of what happens when you argue. You say, "That's not what I meant." They twist your words. You explain again. They find a new angle. Hours pass, energy drains, and you are left doubting yourself. You think you are fighting for truth. But truth cannot be reached in a hall of mirrors. Silence, by contrast, introduces something terrifying to the narcissist, an absence of reflection. They cannot twist what you do not say. They cannot argue with a closed door. They cannot distort a word that was never spoken. Imagine the moment you leave the room mid-argument. Imagine the phone call cut short with no explanation. Imagine the text left unanswered, not because you are powerless, but because you refuse to step back into the theater. That silence is not passive. It is active force. It is you removing oxygen from the fire. And here lies the inevitability. Because they cannot survive without your reflection, therefore silence becomes their slow death. They rage, they bargain, they vanish, but all of it is proof that your silence has shattered the illusion. But make no mistake, if you refuse silence, If you cannot hold the boundary, the cost is devastating. It is not merely annoyance, it is your very identity on the line. Now let us face the other side of the coin. What happens if you never use the dark rule? What is the cost of endlessly explaining, endlessly forgiving, endlessly giving? There are 3 dangers, and each one cuts deeper than the last. Danger 1, endless energy drain. Every day, every conversation, every battle becomes another leak. Your body feels it first: fatigue, heaviness, insomnia. Then your mind follows, constant overthinking, rehearsing dialogues that never end. And finally, your soul itself begins to erode. You become a reservoir with a hole drilled into the bottom, pouring out everything while never refilling. Jung described this state as enantiodromia, when the energy of the psyche turns against itself. Danger 2, identity erosion. Stay in the game long enough and you begin to forget who you are. You no longer speak in your own voice, you only react to theirs. Your decisions shrink, your world narrows, your very sense of self bends under the pressure of their constant projection. Jung warned that the greatest danger to the individual is identification with an alien image, living as a mask that is not your own. That is precisely what happens when you stay in their orbit. Danger 3, the trauma bond. Perhaps the most insidious danger of all. You begin to crave the very person who drains you. Their chaos becomes your normal. Their rare moments of charm feel like salvation. You confuse relief with love, absence with longing, drama with connection. This bond is not affection, it is addiction, and every time you break free only to return, the chains grow tighter. This is why the cost of silence feels high, but the cost of not choosing silence is annihilation. Roughly 1 in 5 empaths, Jung suggested, never escape this cycle because they cannot endure the guilt of saying no. They cling to the bond until nothing remains of them. And so, the choice becomes clear. Endure the temporary storm of guilt, or live forever in the storm of someone else's shadow. If you choose the first, a new reality begins to open. You will see not only what happens to them when the mirror shatters, but what begins to happen inside you. When you finally use the dark rule, the narcissist is not the only one who changes. You do. And the transformation is not instant bliss. It unfolds in phases, each one necessary, each one a passage into individuation. Phase 1, relief and emptiness. At first there is silence. Their calls stop. The arguments cease. You feel a strange calm, as if a storm has finally ended. But alongside the calm comes emptiness. You have been orbiting them for so long that the absence feels like a void. This is not failure. This is detox. You are shedding the addiction to their chaos, and like all withdrawals, it begins with discomfort. Phase 2, guilt tremors. Soon after comes the ache of guilt. You replay your sentence in your mind. That doesn't work for me. This conversation is over. And then the whispers. Was I cruel? Should I call back? Did I overreact? These tremors are not truth. They are echoes of your old identity. Jung observed that when the ego separates from an old pattern, the psyche resists with doubt. It is the death cry of the role you once played. Recognize the guilt as proof that you have broken the cycle. Phase 3, strength returning. Gradually you notice something remarkable. Your energy returns. You laugh more easily. Sleep deepens. Ideas you once abandoned resurface. You rediscover forgotten hobbies, long-buried dreams, the sound of your own voice. This is individuation in action, the return of your true self from the prison of projection. You no longer live as the mirror of another. You live as the author of your own story. And here lies the secret. The aftermath is not just survival, it is rebirth. The boundary does not merely end the narcissist's game, it begins your real life. But you must keep the ground you've gained, because even after the first victory, the old patterns wait at the edges, ready to drag you back. To hold your freedom, you need maintenance practices, daily habits that anchor you in clarity. The boundary works, but only if you sustain it. One line spoken once is not enough. You must build a life where your energy is protected, where your reality is no longer negotiable. Jung often reminded his patients that individuation is not a moment, but a process, a steady practice of aligning with one's true self. Here are 5 practices to make the dark rule more than a single event, to make it a way of life. 1. Journal your non-negotiables. Write down the behaviors you will no longer accept: gaslighting, silent treatments, manipulation. Seeing them on paper turns vague unease into clear law. Every time you are tempted to explain, look at that list and remember, this is my reality. 2. Repeat the mantra daily. Whisper it in the morning before bed. Whenever doubt creeps in, I do not explain my worth. Jung taught that repetition of truth impresses it into the unconscious. The mantra becomes a shield against guilt. 3. Practice one-sentence refusals. Once a day, practice saying no without explanation. It could be as small as refusing an invitation or declining extra work. Each small refusal is training for larger boundaries. Brevity builds strength. 4. Weekly digital audit. Every week, look at your messages, your social feeds, your inbox. Remove one draining contact, mute one manipulative voice, clear one channel of intrusion. Your psyche is shaped not only by people in the room, but also by voices in your phone. 5. Celebrate the silence. Each time you hold your boundary, whether it's walking away, staying quiet, or blocking, you must mark it. Light a candle, take a deep breath, note it in your journal. Small rituals of recognition anchor the new self and prevent relapse. These practices are not accessories, they are armor. Without them, guilt returns, and the narcissist's shadow finds its way back in. With them, you become what Jung called a self-contained vessel, a psyche strong enough to face the world without being consumed by it. And once your boundary becomes a way of life, something extraordinary happens. You realize you are not just protecting yourself, you are mirroring something back to culture itself. You are embodying a medicine society desperately needs. What begins as a personal act of survival becomes, in truth, a cultural remedy. You imagine that setting a boundary only affects your private world. But Jung warned that the sickness of the individual reflects the sickness of the collective. Narcissism is not only a personality trait, it is a cultural epidemic. You see it in politics, in advertising, in social media, in the endless demand to perform and to be consumed. A world addicted to projection is a world starving for boundaries. When you say, "That doesn't work for me, this conversation is over," you are not only speaking to one person, you are speaking into the collective unconscious. You are refusing the mask, not just in your home, but in a culture drowning in masks. Because what is advertising if not a mask demanding reflection? What is political theater if not a narcissist's game played on the scale of nations? Every time you hold your boundary, you strike a blow against this wider illusion. You prove that reality can still be chosen over spectacle. This is why your act matters more than you think. You are not only rescuing your own psyche, you are modeling medicine for a society that has forgotten how to say no. You become a mirror the culture cannot twist, a living example that clarity, not noise, is the cure. But history warns us, not everyone chooses this path. Some stay enslaved to the mask until the end. Others step out, reclaim their lives, and become beacons for those still trapped. To see this contrast is to feel the urgency of your choice. History, like psychology, offers us mirrors. Two types of people appear again and again, those who stay chained to the mask and those who walk away into clarity. The cautionary figure. Think of the endlessly loyal empath who cannot sever the bond. In Jung's writings, he described such souls as swallowed by the other's shadow. One woman, he noted, remained in service to her manipulative partner until her spirit collapsed into depression. She never drew the line. She mistook her suffering for love. In the end, her identity dissolved, not because she was weak, but because she confused self-sacrifice with redemption. This is the tragedy of the unbroken boundary, the annihilation of the self, the exemplary figure. Now picture the one who walked away. Jung often spoke of individuation as a heroic journey, like ancient myths. One man he guided finally stopped feeding his family's endless demands for explanation. With a single refusal, he left their stage. At first, he was branded selfish, cold, ungrateful, but years later, he stood as a teacher, mentoring others who struggled under similar chains. His boundary became his calling. His no became medicine for many. Two paths. Both begin in the same hall of mirrors. One ends in collapse, the other in liberation, and the only difference is whether the person dared to use the dark rule. This is why your decision is not small. You stand in the same place they once stood. The question is, which figure will you resemble when history looks back at you? And this returns us to the beginning, to the paradox that framed our entire journey. For what destroys the narcissist is not anger, not explanation, not endless sacrifice. It is the one thing they cannot survive, your clarity. And so we return to where we began, with the paradox. It was never rage that made the narcissist vanish. Rage only fed them. It was never explanation that set you free. Explanation only deepened the chains. It was clarity, one sentence, one act of refusal, one boundary that cannot be debated. Jung taught that the greatest danger is not in seeing too much of the other. It is in failing to see yourself. The dark rule is not really about them at all. It is about you, about the moment you choose to stop being the mirror and start being the self. About the courage to say, "This doesn't work for me," even when guilt claws at your throat. The danger isn't that you see too much. The danger is failing to build a conscious relationship with what you see. The narcissist appears strong only until you stop playing their game. And when you stop, they vanish. Not because you destroyed them, but because you finally stood in your own reality. So now the question is yours. Which path will you choose? The endless cycle of reflection or the quiet liberation of clarity? Use the dark rule, not as cruelty, not as revenge, but as medicine for yourself and for a culture drowning in masks. And when you do, you will discover the truth. You were never powerless. You were always the mirror. And the moment you turn it away, the illusion dissolves. The time has come to choose clarity over chaos, to step into individuation, to become part of what is next.